I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there.
A bombshell revelation has shaken the British royal family's inner circle. Years before her death, the late Queen Elizabeth II is said to have secretly commissioned a trusted jeweler to create a special crown exclusively for Princess Catherine, with one clear instruction: Camilla must never know about it. For years, the crown lay hidden like a ticking time bomb in the shadows. But as King Charles increasingly hands over power responsibilities and public roles to Prince William and Catherine, the jeweler has come to believe that the moment has finally arrived to carry out the Queen's final wish. However, the secret is no longer secure. Camilla is reported to have learned of the crown's existence and instantly understood that if Catherine receives it, her own standing within the royal family could be seriously undermined. Rather than wait for the story to break, she has allegedly devised a daring plan to track down the crown and destroy it before Charles can present it to Catherine. The question now is whether the late Queen truly failed to anticipate Camilla's reaction. And when King Charles is forced to choose between his wife and his mother's dying wish, whose side will he take? In the final years of her life, as the heavy burden of the crown finally bowed to the laws of time, Queen Elizabeth II, the great monarch who had reigned over Britain for more than 70 years, began to see clearly into the future of the House of Windsor. In the mind of the seasoned queen, the one capable of carrying that future image was none other than Princess Catherine, the granddaughter-in-law she had quietly observed, tested, and placed absolute trust in for over a decade. Before her passing, to realize this strategic yet deeply maternal vision, the late Queen made a bold decision that went beyond the strict administrative protocols of Buckingham Palace. She summoned David Meredith, the third-generation royal jeweler from the renowned Meredith family. David was not only a master craftsman whose hands could breathe life into lifeless metal, but more importantly, he was the most reliable keeper of secrets in the royal household. He had once secretly restored and maintained priceless treasures in the late Queen Mother's private collection. The relationship between the Queen and David was built on absolute loyalty and an unbreakable rule: whatever was spoken in her private study at Windsor Castle would remain there forever. The late Queen personally handed David an antique oak box. Inside were not newly cast gold bars, but a collection of historic gemstones removed from the private, never-publicized jewelry of Queen Victoria and Queen Mary. The Queen's instruction placed a 1,000-pound weight on the old jeweler's shoulders to create an entirely new crown exclusively for Princess Catherine. This masterpiece had to perfectly blend the modern liberated lines of the 21st century with the solemn essence of history, symbolizing a new era in which Catherine would be the model consort. However, the greatest conflict and the reason the atmosphere grew particularly tense was the Queen's foremost condition: the project must be kept in absolute secrecy from all formal approval processes of the Royal Council. And above all, Camilla, the future Queen consort at the time, must never know. Queen Elizabeth II understood all too well Camilla's calculations and ambitions, her long years spent strengthening her position and image after standing in the shadow of public controversy. If Camilla discovered the existence of a treasure meant to shape the future for Catherine, it would undoubtedly ignite a covert power struggle, fracturing the fragile unity of the family the moment the Queen was gone. She wanted to protect Catherine, safeguard her own legacy, and above all, ensure a smooth transfer of power to her grandson William's generation. Receiving the command from the monarch he revered, David Meredith experienced a whirlwind of emotions, from the highest honor to an invisible dread at bearing such an immense responsibility. He understood that he was holding a ticking time bomb capable of shaking the entire palace. Returning to his secret workshop in a remote suburb, completely isolated from glittering London, David began a period of work in utter silence and extreme caution. He performed every step himself, from sketching the design, melting the platinum base, to meticulously setting each gemstone under a microscope, allowing no assistant anywhere near. Every cut, every weld was carried out under dim lamplight and the torment of a world-shaking secret. As months and years passed and Queen Elizabeth II officially passed away, in September 2022, amid the mourning of the entire world, David became even more withdrawn. The crown gradually took shape in the shadows, radiant and proud, like the expectations of the deceased. Yet it also felt like an invisible curse weighing heavily on the old jeweler's chest. Each time he saw Queen Camilla appear radiantly beside King Charles III at grand state events, a cold shiver ran down his spine. He knew the crown resting silently in his triple-layered secure safe was not merely a piece of jewelry, but a supreme political declaration written in precious stones. 4 years had passed since Queen Elizabeth II left the world. 4 years was long enough for the public's tears of mourning to settle, yet it felt like an endless stretch for David Meredith under the crushing weight of silence. The secret crown still lay undisturbed in the wall safe, hidden behind an antique portrait in his workshop, completely detached from the glittering royal world outside. Throughout those 4 years, profound changes had taken place at Buckingham Palace, shifts the old jeweler had quietly followed through court bulletins. Facing the burdens of age and the pressures of a transitional period, King Charles III had begun making strategic moves. The king was increasingly delegating important national responsibilities and key representative roles to Prince William and Princess Catherine. The Welsh couple's frequent appearances at diplomatic tours, grand state banquets, and major charitable initiatives sent an undeniable message to the public. David realized that Catherine's maturity, grace, and impeccable demeanor were turning her into the new spiritual pillar of the kingdom, exactly as the late queen had foreseen years earlier. This invisible shift in power constantly weighed on David's mind. His chest tightened more with each passing day as the question of timing grew heavier. Every new line on Catherine's face seen on screen, every decisive action by King Charles, served as a silent reminder that the moment to fulfill the late queen's wish was drawing near. Delay was no longer a safe option. It was gradually becoming a betrayal of the trust placed in him by the deceased. The old craftsman's heart was torn between the desire to stay safe and protect his family from the political whirlwind and the honor of a royal jeweler who had once sworn loyalty before the crown. The real psychological turning point came on a cold, rainy night when David decided to thoroughly clean the antique oak box, the one that had concealed the original gemstones given to him by the Queen. With the practiced touch of a master craftsman, as his fingers glided across the bottom of the box, he detected a faint discrepancy, just a few millimeters in the red velvet lining. David's heart raced, and instinct told him there was a secret within the secret. With supreme skill and caution, he used a thin metal tool to gently release the hidden latch. The false bottom sprang open, revealing a thick envelope made of imitation leather, sealed with dark red wax bearing Queen Elizabeth II's personal royal crest. Holding the letter in his hands, David's fingers trembled. The late Queen's elegant yet resolute handwriting in black ink appeared on the front, clearly stating, "To my son, Charles III." Only then did David fully grasp the terrifying foresight of the late monarch. She had not only prepared a treasure, but had meticulously planned its legal path through her own heir. This letter was the master key, the supreme royal command, capable of crushing any resistance or legal disputes within the family. Facing the still intact sealed envelope, David understood he had no right to open it, but he had a duty to deliver it to its rightful recipient. The appearance of the letter struck like a bolt of lightning, sweeping away 4 years of hesitation in David's heart. He carefully placed the envelope into a secure leather pouch, sat down at his workbench, and began planning a special meeting. The days of hiding in the shadows were over. The old jeweler took his first steps to bring Queen Elizabeth II's buried legacy into the light, ready to face whatever storms might rage behind the palace walls. In the deep corridors of Buckingham Palace, power was not measured only by titles, but by sensitivity to the smallest shifts. Queen Camilla, with the instincts of someone who had spent half her life fighting for her current position, remained in a state of constant high alert. Recently, King Charles III's repeated approval of new royal privileges for Princess Catherine, along with the public's growing favoritism toward the Princess of Wales, had stirred a lingering unease in her heart. She sensed an undercurrent threatening to push her into the shadows of history, turning her into a fleeting transitional chapter before the reign fully belonged to William and Catherine's generation. Camilla's suspicion turned into action one afternoon, when she stopped by the king's private archive office to retrieve documents for the upcoming Trooping the Color ceremony. While flipping through records of royal jewelry maintenance costs, her sharp eyes froze on a special budget entry from 4 years earlier. It was a hidden allocation that had bypassed normal channels, personally approved by the late Queen Elizabeth II in her final months, directed to David Meredith's workshop. What made Camilla's heart clench was the code for the gemstones used. They belonged to Queen Mary's never-publicized private collection symbols of the highest consort authority. With her keen mind and a network of loyal eyes and ears built over many years, Camilla quickly connected the dots. She launched a discreet, sophisticated secret investigation. Through fragmented reports from trusted bodyguards about David Meredith's unusual travel patterns and secure vehicles visiting his suburban residence, the full picture gradually emerged. This was no ordinary commemorative gift. It was a secret crown, a masterpiece conceived in darkness, created exclusively for Catherine. The moment the truth hit her, a wave of rage and fear rose in Camilla's throat. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the arms of her royal chair. She understood the language of royal jewelry all too well. These were not mere stones, they were silent decrees. If a crown carrying the historic bloodline of past queens were bestowed upon Catherine, it would be a fatal blow to her own position as the current queen consort. It would be a silent declaration from Elizabeth II's past. Catherine was the true heir to the dynasty, while Camilla was merely a footnote on the side. Her pride, the position she had sacrificed her honor and youth for, would not allow it. Fear quickly transformed into a ruthless decision in Camilla's mind. She knew she could not stop it openly, as confronting the late queen's wish would turn her into an enemy of both the royal family and the public. The only way was to destroy it before it ever saw the light of day. If the crown disappeared or was melted into anonymous metal, the secret would remain forever unproven, and the threat to her throne would be snuffed out in its cradle. Camilla began planning her operation with the extreme caution of a predator. In her locked private chamber, under dim candlelight, she meticulously outlined every step. She reached out to a group of loyal former bodyguards who owed her favors from their time at Clarence House, and assigned them the mission of breaking into David Meredith's workshop. The order was absolute: find a way to access the safe, take the crown, and use acid or a high-temperature furnace to completely destroy its original form, staging the whole thing as an ordinary theft by greedy opportunists. In the days that followed, every move Camilla made radiated a terrifying calm. She still smiled graciously. Before the cameras, still stood attentively beside the king, but behind her cold gaze lay an iron will determined to protect her power at any cost. A silent, suffocating confrontation had officially been ignited behind the majestic palace walls, where the darkest schemes were now relentlessly hunting the treasure of the future. The atmosphere in David Meredith's workshop had never felt so thick and suffocating. The instincts of a man who had spent his entire life in the shadows of royal secrets told him that an invisible net was slowly tightening. In the past few days, unfamiliar cars with tinted windows had repeatedly appeared at the corner of the quiet suburban street, and the workshop's security system kept registering unusual interference signals. The climax came the night before when a lock on the outer gate was pried open, a faint scratch, but enough for the old jeweler to understand that the veil hiding the crown had been torn. The enemy was no longer distant, and their sole target was to erase this masterpiece before it could fulfill its mission. Standing before the wall, safe cold sweat soaked the bent back of David. Initial panic quickly gave way to a clear, decisive resolve. He could no longer wait for a perfect opportunity in the future, because that future might be crushed tonight. Pulling the still intact envelope with its dark red wax seal from the secure leather pouch, David stared at the handwritten words of the late Queen Elizabeth II. According to their original agreement, he was only permitted to deliver it directly to the king without intervening. Yet in this life-or-death moment, when loyalty stood on the line between blind obedience and saving a legacy, the old craftsman knew he had to seek guidance from the one who had already passed. With the steady yet trembling hands of a master artisan, David used a small knife to carefully slice along the edge of the wax, preserving the Queen's crest undamaged. The imitation leather paper inside unfolded, carrying the familiar scent of sandalwood from the study at Windsor Castle 4 years earlier. As the first lines appeared under the desk lamp, David's heart skipped a beat. The terrifying wisdom and foresight of the late monarch shone through every elegant stroke of ink. Queen Elizabeth II had anticipated everything. In the letter, she wrote that she was fully aware of the complexities and jealousies that would arise within the family once she was gone. She knew Camilla would not easily accept a treasure that affirmed Catherine's future position, and that conservative forces within the palace might try to bury it. Her words were not merely advice, but a strategic command, granting David the authority to break the silence if he sensed the treasure was under threat. The Queen instructed him to immediately find a way to reach King Charles III and deliver the letter personally as a mother's final plea to her son, compelling him to stand up and protect justice and the future of the House of Windsor. After reading the letter, a wave of relief mixed with pride surged through the old jeweler's heart. All the torment, fear, and doubt of the past 4 years vanished, completely replaced by an iron will. He was no longer a man hiding a treasure in the shadows. He was the executor of history's highest will. David understood that stepping into the light meant placing himself and his career in grave danger, but the honor of the Meredith lineage would not allow him to falter. David began to act with extreme caution and subtlety. He packed no luggage to avoid drawing attention from those watching outside. He carefully placed the crown into a specialized shock-proof and fireproof case, then hid it inside an old rusty jeweler's tool chest. The late Queen's letter was pressed securely into the lining of his wool coat. He slipped out through the back door, crossed the overgrown garden, to a narrow path where a trusted old friend waited in an ordinary delivery van. Sitting in the passenger seat, watching the workshop fade into the darkness through the side mirror, David clutched the tool chest tightly to his chest. His destination was Buckingham Palace, where King Charles III was staying. The private study of King Charles III at Buckingham Palace was steeped in the quiet stillness of a late night. On the desk stacks of state files and documents for the upcoming Trooping the Color ceremony lay open, but the monarch's mind was elsewhere. Directly across from him stood the elderly jeweler David Meredith, still wearing clothes damp with night dew. With trembling yet respectful hands, David placed the rusty tool chest on the table, along with the imitation leather envelope whose red wax seal had been partially cut open. As David stepped back to allow the truth to unfold, King Charles slowly picked up the letter. Seeing the elegant yet resolute handwriting of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, a complex wave of emotion ran down the king's spine. He ran his slightly rough fingers gently along the edge of the paper, as if seeking the lingering warmth of the one who had passed. Line by line, under the greenish glow of the desk lamp, the full story of the secret crown emerged, a masterpiece crafted from the historic gemstones of Queen Mary and Queen Victoria, created exclusively for Princess Catherine. The further he read, the deeper King Charles's brows furrowed the lines on his forehead, etching more sharply under the weight of every word. The late Queen had left not just a gift, but a shrewd and far-sighted political testament. She had precisely analyzed the necessary generational shift for the survival of the monarchy, along with the obstacles and jealousies within the family that Catherine would face, something the king knew all too well his great mother was referring to. The final plea from a mother to her son was not a dry command, but a message of deep trust that he, as head of the realm, would have the courage to protect the future and stability of the House of Windsor. A fierce inner battle erupted within the reigning king. Charles rose and walked slowly to the large window overlooking the misty Mall Square in the night fog. He was torn between two ruthless thoughts. On one side was the internal peace of the royal family. He understood clearly that publicly revealing this crown and presenting it to Catherine according to the wish would be a silent declaration, diminishing Queen Camilla's position, igniting a storm of jealousy in his own household. His health and the stability of the court at this time needed calm more than covert power struggles. Choosing silence and storing the crown forever in the royal vault seemed the safest solution to avoid all conflict. Yet when his gaze fell upon the old tool chest containing the treasure, and his mother's words echoed again in his mind, the pride and duty of a king prevailed. Charles understood that the future of the British monarchy belonged neither to him nor to Camilla, but to the generation of William and Catherine. His absolute respect for his late mother, combined with the clear realization of the public's growing affection for the Princess of Wales, led him to his final decision. He could not sacrifice a grand strategic vision from his predecessor for temporary selfish peace. Returning to the desk, King Charles III's eyes no longer held the hesitation of a son, but the cold, decisive resolve of a monarch. He personally opened the tool chest, lifted out the protective case, and gazed at the crown. The sparkling light of the pale blue diamonds reflected in his eyes like confirmation of the right choice. The king carefully placed the letter into his most secure drawer, then looked up at the anxious old jeweler waiting before him. Charles gave a slight nod and acknowledgement, and the highest recognition of David's loyalty. Instead of keeping silent or choosing a private occasion, Charles decided on the boldest solution to turn the upcoming final rehearsal for the Trooping the Color ceremony into the stage to unveil this treasure. It would be the place where the entire royal family, including Camilla, would be forced to witness this historic transfer of power, with no opportunity to resist or prevent it. The plan was set, and the king began drafting secret orders to the household office, preparing for an event that would forever change the balance of power within the palace. The atmosphere in the Great Hall of Windsor Castle during the final rehearsal for the Trooping the Color ceremony carried an oddly solemn and oppressive weight. This was an internal event reserved for the core members of the House of Windsor to review the ceremonial protocols before facing the public. Queen Camilla sat in the front row, her posture elegant, her sharp eyes sweeping across the room with quiet triumph. She believed her plan had succeeded completely, as David Meredith's suburban workshop had been fully isolated under her people's surveillance, and there had been no reports of the treasure being moved through any official royal channels. Camilla's confidence was shattered the moment King Charles III stepped onto the dais. Instead of beginning the usual inspection speech, the king stood in silence for a moment, his gaze solemn and profound as it passed over every face present in the hall. When his eyes settled on Prince William and Princess Catherine, a flicker of emotion crossed his face before being replaced by iron resolve. The king placed his hand slowly on the lectern, his voice deep and resonant, and began to announce a supreme secret bequest from the late Queen Elizabeth II, something no one in the court had heard mentioned in the past 4 years. From behind the red velvet curtain at the back of the hall, a hidden door opened. David Meredith emerged in formal black attire, his gloved hands in velvet gloves, carefully carrying a silver tray draped with royal silk. When the king personally drew back the silk cloth, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The crown of the future appeared radiant and proud beneath the crystal chandeliers. Its sleek modern platinum lines embraced the pale blue diamonds and ancient rubies from Queen Mary. The magnificent royal light carrying the spirit of the British Empire's most prosperous eras reflected into the eyes of every witness, eclipsing all other jewels in the room. Camilla's blood ran cold in that instant. Her face drained from flushed to deathly pale in mere seconds. Her chest tightened, her breathing grew rapid, yet she summoned every ounce of willpower to keep her expression from distorting in front of the internal cameras and the eyes of the family. Her fingers clenched the Chanel leather handbag so tightly that deep imprints marked the fine material. Shock quickly turned into utter helplessness. She realized she had completely failed. All her shadowy plots to sabotage and destroy the treasure had been neutralized by the late Queen's far-sighted vision, and it was her own husband, King Charles III, who had personally lifted the veil of secrecy. In the absolute silence of the Great Hall, King Charles III stepped down from the dais. He took the crown from the old jeweler David, then turned toward Catherine. The Princess of Wales, with her characteristic elegant poise and calm, bowed her head, according to court protocol. As the king's hands carefully placed the crown upon her elegantly styled hair, the moment transcended a simple jewelry presentation. It was a silent decree, a resolute affirmation before history, that the future destiny and prosperity of the House of Windsor had now officially been entrusted to William and Catherine's generation. Witnessing the scene, Prince William gently squeezed his wife's hand, his eyes filled with pride and the steadfast resolve of a future king. Meanwhile, Camilla remained rooted to her seat, a frozen, strained smile on her lips as the surrounding royals began murmuring congratulations. Her plan to stop it had vanished into thin air, and her position as the current queen consort suddenly felt faded before the radiant halo of her daughter-in-law. Yet as the ceremony ended and people began to move, Camilla's narrowed eyes followed the crown on Catherine's head with a cold, razor-sharp glint. The fury and wounded pride did not break this powerful woman. In the darkness of her mind, new schemes began to stir. The covert war for influence and power behind the majestic walls of Buckingham Palace had never truly ended. It had only entered a new, even more ruthless and brutal chapter. After finishing the story, in your opinion, does King Charles III's public act of presenting the secret crown to Catherine right in front of Camilla demonstrate the decisiveness of a monarch who places the greater good above all? Or is it a risky decision that could permanently fracture his own marriage? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.